Modern architecture is no longer bound by rules. This allows creativity and cutting-edge ideas to form daily. The technology of construction must therefore evolve. At BlueScope, we are at the forefront of innovation. We develop steel not only to serve as material, but also as a source of inspiration, helping to fuel the creativity of architects looking to build the latest modern architectural marvels. BlueScope's innovative lightweight steel has allowed architectural forms to become increasingly organic. Our flat, curved and tapered steel panels reveal a new world of possibilities for freeform architecture. Once freed from the limitations of traditional materials, buildings can now be crafted precisely according to aspired values and aesthetics. Every building has the potential to become one of the world's iconic designs. Innovations in coated steel have helped improve its utility and beauty in all types of designs, from buildings to home appliances. BlueScope's innovations have transformed steel into a primary material suitable for all types of design and construction projects. Even houses can now be included, as our innovative structural steel can be used anywhere from the roof, walls to the floor, and is durable in all weather conditions. Building houses has never been this easy, convenient or quick, and standards have never been higher. BlueScope will never stop developing and innovating. We want to push boundaries and help transform a great design into an architectural masterpiece recognized around the world. With our networks in Australia, America, and Asia, BlueScope has become a world leader in innovation and the production of coated steel and pre-painted steel. We are advancing the construction and design industries and improving the standard of living for people of all classes. We manufacture the highest quality cold-rolled steel, coated steel, and pre-painted steel of beauty and unmatched durability. BlueScope has also set new safety standards in the construction industry. Our system, processes and equipment during installation put the safety of workers first. Going beyond the limits of imagination will no longer be just a dream if we have innovations that can make it a reality. BlueScope will work with architects and designers to support and inspire each other with the goal of advancing the worlds of construction and architecture together.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Hansa Silachai Panit.
I am Pacharin Grunet. We are the co-MC today.
Welcome to ASA International Forum 2017, a much-awaited activity that has brought in speakers from all over the world to share their ideas and to tell us how they work.
This year, we are honored to present 6 firms of architects who have professional role of developing design, Studiomake from Bangkok, UID Architect from Japan, Arjen Renden Studio from Sri Lanka, Chavitella Studio from Germany, Shinko Matsuda and Kazuhisa Osubo Architects from Japan, and S Studio Borossi Vega from Spain. Their interesting diversity of backgrounds and contexts on which each architect has been working contribute to the variety within the world of architecture. That somehow also reflects the inevitable dynamism of our world we share.
Before we start the presentations, may I introduce Mr. Achapon Dusinanon, the President of Association of Siamese Architects under your royal patronage, to come up on stage to give an opening remark.
Good morning, our guest speaker, sponsor, distinguished guests, and all of attendants. Welcome to ASA Forum 2017. Architect Expo is the largest architecture and construction material and innovation exposition in ASEAN. One of the highlight activities at Architect Expo is this ASA Forum, for which is organized annually as a knowledge-sharing platform to present knowledge and innovative ideas of distinguished architects from around the world. As the theme changes every year, this time we take on a theme that everyone can relate to, reconsidering dwelling. Is this year's theme focusing on the various conditions of home or being at home? It is undeniable that the ideas of home is the mirror of the truth of our society. And it is marked by science and refinement that precisely reflected the level of civilization of humanity. For this reason, the Association of Siamese Architects would like to present the viewpoint of architects who practice professionally in designing habitat in different perspectives. On behalf of the Association of Siamese Architects, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to our guest speakers for the acceptance to present at ASA Forum 2017. I hope you enjoy this international lecture series, and I wish you a pleasant time during your stay in Thailand. Thank you.
Thank you very much. คุณอัชพลได้พูดถึงแนวทางหรือธีมที่เราจะเน้นในเรื่องของการออกแบบบ้านจากในหลายๆด้านนะคะปีนี้ทั้งในด้านของวัสดุเทคโนโลยีการก่อสร้างและรวมทั้งสถาปนิกผู้ออกแบบบ้านก็จะเป็นธีมหลักที่เราจะนำเสนอlecture series ในปีนี้เช่นเดียวกันนะคะ Next I would like to invite คุณเดชอาคมบุญมา the Vice President of Marketing of NS Blue Scope Thailand, the sponsor of this event, to be on stage to say some word to us. Thank you.
สวัสดีครับ Good morning อาจารย์อัจฉพล ดุสินานนท์ the President of ASA, honor speaker, and ASA member, and ladies and gentlemen. My name is Deshakom Bunma, the Vice President of Marketing, NS BlueScope Thailand. On behalf of BlueScope, I would like to give a big a special gratitude to Ajahn Achapon and ASA for giving us such a great opportunity for BlueScope to be part of this such a great event. And we have been sponsoring ASA Forum for the 4th year, and every year we see ever-growing success of this event. So I wish another year of success and even bigger success for today and tomorrow. So I wish you enjoy the event. ขออนุญาตแปลเป็นไทยนะครับก็สวัสดีนะครับทุกท่านนะครับแล้วก็ผมเดชาคมบุญมานะครับเป็นรองประธานฝ่ายการตลาดของ BlueScope นะครับก็ขอต้อนรับเข้าสู่อาสาฟอรัมของปีนี้นะครับก็อย่างที่บอกว่าเราเป็นสปอนเซอร์มา4 ปีแล้วทุกปีก็จะเห็นว่าอาสาฟอรัมประสบความสำเร็จมากขึ้นเรื่อยๆนะครับสำหรับ BlueScope เองอย่างที่ท่านอาจจะได้ทราบจากวิดีโอที่แนะนำตัวว่าเราเป็นผู้ผลิตเหล็กนะครับแต่ว่าเรามองว่าจะทำยังไงให้ทุกคนได้เห็นว่าเหล็กเนี่ยไม่ใช่แค่เหล็กนะครับเป็นวัตถุที่สามารถนำไปสร้างจินตนาการในการออกแบบนะครับแล้วก็แก้ไขปัญหาทางด้านสถาปัตยกรรมของท่านได้นะครับเพราะฉะนั้นเนี่ยงานอาสาฟอรัมเนี่ยถือว่าก็ตอบสนองกับแนวคิดของเราก็คือว่าพยายามที่จะสร้างแรงบันดาลใจให้กับพวกแบบนะครับแล้วก็สถาปนิกนะครับโดยการฟังแล้วก็เรียนรู้จากวิทยากรจากต่างประเทศนะครับเพราะฉะนั้นเนี่ยก็ขอให้ทุกท่านนะครับสนุกสนานแล้วก็เพลิดเพลินกับการรับฟังแล้วก็ได้ความรู้ใหม่ๆจากท่านวิทยากรนะครับก็ขอขอบคุณด้วยครับขอบคุณครับ
Thank you very much for Mr. Deshakom for the welcome speech. Before we introduce the first speaker of today, please allow me to remind you to switch off your mobile phone or turn it to silent mode. For those of you who use translating headset, please control the volume to appropriate level. The parking also can stand in front of the hall. Now it's time to begin our days.
For the first session, Mr. David Schafer from Studiomake, a Bangkok-based design office founded by David Schafer and his late partner Im Salasarin Schafer since 2009. David graduated from the University of Arizona and Fine Arts at Cranbrook Academy of Art. Together with his interests, David Schafer is an architect and fabricator.
Studiomake is inspired by tradition, technology, and constant questioning. The studio works in an integrated approach, where the act of design and act of construction have no distinct boundaries. The overlapping lanes of architecture, interior, furniture, and object design also are explored by the team and designer and craftsmen in their studio and their workshops.
Studiomake's outstanding projects include Ban Sai Ma, their home and studio, Dude Design Cigar Bar with red bricks rotating wall, Patana Gallery, gathering space for architect, designers, and artists, Guanim Pavilion for Chinese Thai Institute at Rangsit University. Please welcome Mr. David Schafer.
Good morning. Sawadee Krap. Thank you, ASA, for inviting me. Kun Achapon. Thank you all for spending your Saturday morning with me. I'd actually like to try to keep my lecture a little short today, so that I can spend a little more time with chatting afterwards. I think conversations are more interesting than monologues. And selfishly, I know that he will be able to help me articulate and tease out some of my thoughts better than I can by myself, so hopefully that's a benefit to you all as well. Because I'm speaking in my hometown and to an audience that is probably bored of my work, I'd like to spend a little bit of time today on the theme of the fair this year, this idea of home, and what it means to me both personally and professionally. I've been thinking about it a lot recently as the paradigms within my own home have shifted and seem far from settled. Certainly some things have remained constant, but the perception of even fixed objects has changed dramatically. And personally this is agonizing, but professionally it's intriguing. And all of this, of course, happens independent of the architecture. Of course, it remains structurally sound. But I find the reflections and resonance within the spaces and constructs shift over time. And it seems that nothing within the home is truly immutable. All is relative to the lives and interactions within. So the following images on the left here are pictures of Bansaima, our home and studio. And so I saw this lecture as an opportunity to formalize some of these thoughts about home and to use our work as a lens in which to maybe find some clarity. Please understand I'm not trying to offer my own work as proof that I have fully mastered or integrated these concepts or considerations. And I definitely offer no manifesto today. Simply observations, most of them quite obvious, maybe. But it seemed like a worthy exercise to try to articulate and depict these thoughts, not only perhaps to kind of ease the current transition, but also to inform our future efforts as a studio. Because I think, designing a home for a client is a really special privilege for an architect, one that deserves deep consideration, of course. We conceive of homes as our designs, as timely solutions to a finite set of requirements. But I think it's good to remind ourselves that home only really starts when we leave, when people move in. And ideally, that home strengthens with time. So I assure you that I don't normally quote or even read Heidegger, but when the book Building Dwelling Thinking was forced upon me in architecture school, I came across one passage that really resonated with me. It was not only beautiful and poetic, but it helped me at a young age really place architecture within the environment in a meaningful way. Well, let me read the quote and I can explain further. The sky is the vaulting path of the sun, the course of the changing moon, the wandering glitter of the stars, the seasons and their changes, the light and the dusk of day, the gloom and glow of night, the clemency and inclemency of the weather, the drifting clouds and the blue depth of the ether. At a young age, I had a pretty simplistic view of architecture, as to be expected, and at the time this passage completely reversed the way I'd always conceptualized a sort of building-centric architecture. And while nothing man-made is mentioned in that passage, to me, within the writing, it was implicit. I couldn't help but visualize these phenomena moving across, above, around a structure. And again, not that architecture is the center of the world, but that the structure could become the backdrop or even a canvas to the natural world. That in a way, architecture could be a timepiece and perhaps a muse of the atmosphere, a record of the seasons and events. So there's a really nice atmospheric and spatial shift that happens during the twilight and the transition from day to night. is something that I think is maybe underexplored or underconsidered within my own work as well. But the idea or the experience of windows that once transported you outside, brought you views outside, now become black and reflective, and interior spaces become introspective. And also these interior spaces then become more observable at night to the outside. Light and acoustic qualities shift. And it's obvious, I know, but I think it's worthy of closer attention. And so nighttime is when most people truly experience their home, right? It's when people gather, ideally work. Work life is slowly muted. And as it gets later, the silence grows, and so does introspection and intimacy. So this week I spent some time photographing my house at night. And rarely do I take the time to really consider what it looks like from this point of view. The mosquitoes were certainly happy to see me. But of course, you know, photographing spaces at night, there's a very different quality. They're visibly, perceptibly warmer. The contrast between bright spaces and dark spaces, moving from lit rooms to unlit rooms. And even the graininess of the photos when you take these shots. And finding the edges of illumination. This is our library, which is maybe a nice place to transition to the next thought. You know, books represent many things, but they embody a certain energy and a certain potential. They represent a hope and a pursuit of knowledge, and even just the pursuit of entertainment. But there's something progressive and active about collecting and inspiring to a higher level of awareness and fulfillment that, to me, books represent. And I think crafting a home is also about aspiration, not in the materialistic sense of the word. I'm not talking to living above your means or that kind of states of dissatisfaction. It's certainly not contrary to the philosophy of a sufficiency economy. But I'm talking simply about the positive forward momentum, trying to build a better environment, and not just physically, but for your family, for yourself. That's the sense of aspiration that I'm trying to identify, that you aspire to provide a better environment for your children, for yourself. And so while I'm certainly not qualified to unpack the sociological aspects of a positive household, as an architect, I pursue aspiration through observation, through case study. And a particular pivotal moment for me came through several pilgrimages of sorts that I'll share briefly. So a house worthy of its own lecture, of course, a lecture series perhaps, is the Maison de Verre by Pierre Chareau, which is situated in the center of Paris. And it's a highly orchestrated, finely tuned environment, truly a machine for living. Every detail highly considered. Another house worthy of its own lecture, worthy of its own lecture series, the Eames House, situated in the trees just above the beach, California. Certainly a very different context than the Chareau House or the Maison de Verre. And what's interesting to me about visiting these pieces of architecture is, of course, not only what we learn spatially, what successes there are and what these guys did right that makes these buildings so profound, but I always find myself spending time taking pictures of the patina, the worn, weathered parts of these projects. And it's where these kind of hard edges start to become blurry, the neat lines that were once drawn considerations where we have about where the architecture stops and starts, start to fade and start to blur. You know, we imagine perfection as we pursue our practice on a daily basis. We think in quantifiable and finite boundaries, where materials end, when construction stops, when people move in. But really the way architecture lives is that construction continues. Rain, humidity, heat are all constantly tooling the architecture. And so this next idea is simply about where, about how things evolve and weather. So this week I also spent some time photographing my house, looking for details and designs that occurred independently of me, things that I did not plan, and things that happen in spite of my efforts in some cases. The weathering of different types of wood based on slightly different finishes. The way bricks slowly weather to their preferred, more rounded state. The way algae grows and is not easily chased away. The way daily routines become observable. And how truer materials start to reveal themselves. So as a studio, we're fundamentally more interested in how buildings feel rather than how they look. And we were able to spend some time kind of digging into this idea last year, by observing old, insignificant pieces of architecture and looking at how they weather and how patterns emerge. You know, we emphasize a certain physicality within our architectural process, and similarly, we want to emphasize an architectural experience that's also a physical endeavor in the way that users engage their environment by pushing, pulling, resting, holding, leaning, nudging, grabbing. And so as we engage in this very hands-on process for this research, we started to think about the hand, of course, and how the hand engages tools and objects. And we started to, in a way, sketch for the hand and create objects that would fit. And so from this, we crafted a series of door handles, in a way, that start to engage this idea of where and start to not only respond to it, perhaps capitalize on it. This is crystal alum. So this is that natural crystal that is sometimes used as a deodorant. So the idea with this door handle was that as you use it, your hand would get clean, not dirtier, perhaps. So you wouldn't have to push your way out of the bathroom with your elbow. Here we're playing with wood, choosing materials that can weather, that are receptive to oxidization and wear. So this is the partially completed collection laid out on the table in our workshop. And this idea of collection in the fashion design or furniture design sense is a way of describing a complex idea through example, a constellation of sorts, or multiple points within space that start to define a shape or a boundary within which one is working. And so we've always defined our home as where our stuff is. It's the well-worn, well-loved objects within our spaces that keep time, that record our touch, index our memories, witness our histories. And in this sense, home is an accumulation of objects that are generally more important and more valuable than their actual worth. And again, this is not about accumulation of wealth or object lust. Maybe it is about object lust. We can talk about that later, beyond. So, as designers, we communicate through form, detail, material, and so objects we collect become a valuable part of our conversation, a valuable part of how we communicate with each other. And so we have this library of objects that form a reference and reference a personal history, and that we've collected them in certain places and times, certain locations, certain moments. And so I'm going to actually take a step back in a way, a little time travel maybe, to maybe not only give a little more context to home by showing some previous versions of our home, but also go back to where our work really started to become focused on these objects and this idea of domesticity that wasn't necessarily architecture, but was certainly architectural in its tectonics and spatial pursuits. So 10 years ago, sorry, I'm way over there. 10 years ago, I was very young. Hopefully in another 10 years, I'll be able to say that again. And this was our first project together. This was a loft in San Diego that we made some stuff in and lived in. And we got a little press, and we took ourselves very seriously. And we saw everything we did as an experimentation and kind of a future, a focus on a future practice. And there were some really interesting things that came from this little experiment. And one was that I was surprised at how we were able to really adapt to unique spaces and tighter tolerances than we think. We are more adaptable than we believe ourselves to be. And I was constantly amazed at how easy it was to actually live with some of the weird stuff that we did. The other observation, based on feedback from the opinion of 50% of the internet, I guess, was that not everyone is willing to adapt, and that a lot of people have a fixed definition of what home should be and should look like and should feel like. And so part of our transition in moving here was to spend a few years going to grad school and making things. And so we left a hip California loft and ended up in a Midwestern mansion. And it felt like home. It felt like the same space in a lot of ways. So at Cranbrook Academy of Art in Michigan, we studied metals and ceramics. The ceramic piece is shown here, part of a project called My Other Half, that was, at one sense, very autobiographical, very tectonic, about joints, fastenings that happen within personalities as well as furniture. So the ceramic vessels and these tables became this collaboration where they started to, they happened somewhat parallel. They started to influence each other. The ceramic vessels are intentionally vague and domestic in their form. The tables as well. And then by making strange, by cleaving and cutting, and by, in a way, distorting them, we're really starting to focus on the reconnection and the joints. So when two things to come together, this third happens. That joint in between becomes a moderator. And so each half grows its own personality, and that bonding between the two halves becomes a significant object into itself. Another project was a series of pocket watches that were not functional and that they did not tell time, but they marked the passage of time in different ways. So this piece is called White Flag. This is White Lie. This is Whitewash. White Noise. And White Hot. So I guess this would be the closest thing to art, I guess I could say, that we've ever made. Still very architectural and I think the way we talk about it, but also very personal and very subjective. Some more ceramic vessels. These ones were an interesting transition because they're also very autobiographical in a way. So these vessels are, in a way, commemorative pieces, in that they mark our geographic journey from California to Detroit. And each one of these pieces represents an area code, the telephone area code in which we drove through. And so we codified the area codes into 3-digit, well, they are 3 digits, and we translated those 10 digits into numbers or into forms, and then allowed those forms to be assembled to represent each area code. In this method of assembly, this kind of technical process in which we made these slip cast ceramic vessels by creating a series of modular molds, took us to another project, this one called Unlimited Edition Vessels. In this, we took this idea to kind of an extreme degree, where we developed a series of molds that were designed to be interchangeable. And so in engaging the slip casting process, which, without getting too technical, is a very industrial form of making ceramics. It's how your Starbucks coffee mug is made. So it, at one point, is very industrial and very designed for mass production. But what we were doing here was creating a system that could allow for mass customization, in that a series of molds designed to come together in random ways creates multiple vessels. So from 30 or 40 different molds, hundreds of thousands of vessels could be made. We made just a little over 100. And so this way of assembly and these kind of architectural themes and this way of working, directly translated and became the beginnings of our practice and how we engage our architecture. And so to jump forward again now to present or future terms, I guess, I wanted to show a couple houses that we're working on right now. So we have a small house that we're working on in Pranbury for a client who is an avid kite surfer. And the beach there in Pranbury is great for that. I guess it's windy. Sounds miserable to me, but she's into it. So this house is a place for her to go on the weekends and spend a little bit of time away from Bangkok. And so because it's such a small house, hopefully you can see that, and it has a pretty small budget, it became really difficult, we realized, to do something interesting with perhaps less interesting contractors in a way. So we really quickly came to the idea that we should build this prefabricated, that we would build it here in Bangkok and truck it down there. And that way we could do something more interesting architecturally and still stick within the budget and make it happen quickly, in theory, the construction at least. So this is the house. It's a small little box with a room for a bed, a little guest room, a bathroom, a kitchen. And so we made it a perfect square, and I'll take you through kind of the fabrication process or concept. We made it a perfect square to try to capitalize on the prefab quality. I think I keep saying precast, but I actually mean prefab. So the foundation would be made by a local contractor, the floor, the structure, and we'd have a small space underneath that would get enclosed and then bermed around, so we would fill around it. And once that foundation is done, then the prefab components would start to arrive on site. And so there's three modules, three interior modules, a kitchen, a pantry rather, the bathroom, and then a bed storage unit. And then the prefabricated walls are, we conceived of as these T-shaped components. So we looked very closely at the maximum envelope of the truck. And so we realized that in order to get the maximum ceiling height, that we could take the diagonal. And so each of the four walls is an identical T-shaped structure. And so now we get some benefit of having a really tiny house, but also having repetitive components. So each of these T-shaped walls is identical in shape. And we decided to, like I said, have the floor made by a local contractor. That way we could again, be a little more creative with the envelope on the truck. So not having to include the floor within our prefabricated module allowed for this really wide roof span and this slightly higher than normal ceiling height. So the T's come to site, get assembled into this kind of square donut. And then in the center, we have a structural frame that then gets assembled, placed in the middle, like that little plastic thing that comes inside your pizza. And then four more slices arranged on the top, allowing a clear story for ventilation and sunlight. And then once the building itself is complete, the deck is assembled around it. That would actually be precast. So for that, we're planning on using H-piles, so Saukim, and using those as a concrete deck in a way that just gets assembled. The raised portion serves two purposes. It's an area for a future addition, and then also acts as a carport. Another house we're working on is in a decidedly different context, Soyanakat, so a very dense site. And for this house, it's a different, it's a different client, obviously, but it's a very different set of parameters. So here, the clients are fairly young. They're very focused on cooking, and the kitchen is really kind of the center of their daily life. And so, our first obvious move was to put the kitchen at the center of the house. And so the partie, the design of the house itself is pretty dumb. It's really just a kitchen in the middle with some boxes around it. And here's our study model. And kind of the main, I think, feature, that's the kitchen, those two boxes on the lower right there, is this kind of sloped living room that in a way almost looks like bleachers. So right now there's this kind of performance quality to their kitchen almost, in that a series of large steps moves up to a second level dining area, and those steps become inhabitable spaces. Like I said, it's a sloped living room, so there's areas for books, for lounge chairs, for sitting, relaxing, really for places for their friends to hang out while they cook. And so this is just beginning design. And we're also considering doing this prefabricated as well because of the repetitious nature of those modules. Right now what we need to figure out is access to the site. So that will really be the controlling factor. And so that's what we're working on right now. So if there's any questions, or I guess chat will come up and we can talk a little bit. But I'm certainly open to questions about anything I've shown today, or if there's questions in general about our practice.
Sorry. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. David. May I formally introduce the moderator for these sessions, Mr. Chatpong Chunridimon, to come up on stage. And this is the beginning of Q&A session as well. If you have any questions that you would like to ask, you're welcome to write down on a small sheet of paper and pass it to the staff nearest to you. And also you can use the microphone at the central aisles of the hall as well.
Should I start talking?
Yes, okay. Please.
I guess I'll have a few questions for you, but for the Q&A session, I think it would be a great idea if the questions were asked directly by the audience, because it's more fun and more interactive, rather than writing down questions, so that there's a good interaction. And don't be afraid to ask questions. If you want to ask in Thai, I'd be happy to translate.
ภาษาไทยก็ได้
ภาษาไทยก็ได้
แต่ว่าไม่เข้าใจ
Can I just start off by just making a few comments how I really appreciate the lecture. It's not your typical lecture, as David and I were talking about earlier, where he shows plans and he walks us through the house and tells us about his architectural moves. It's just about kind of emotional content of what a home is, to the touch, kind of to me, to the heart as well, which I really appreciate. But maybe I could say a few words about you and your practice from what I know, from my personal experience as a friend to you and Im, and a brother, and a fan of Studiomake. Studiomake is very special to me personally. It's very rare that I meet architects who have such a clear philosophy of design, and when I go over to your house, you live that philosophy. You live for making things, appreciating things, touching things, hoarding things. If you get a chance to go to Ban Saima, it's one of the most beautiful homes I've ever seen, understated, but the greatest thing about it is all the shit you have in your house. It's the most interesting museum-like quality, because David and Im would buy the most eclectic, wonderful, weird-ass stuff throughout their lives and assemble them in the most beautiful ways. So I always enjoy so much every time I'm able to go over to your house. Which leads me to my next question and comment. It may be the elephant in the room. If I may.
By all means.
It's been a little bit over a year that Im passed away from cancer.
Yep.
And it's been quite a year for you and for Studiomake.
Yeah.
Can you talk in terms of, first of all, I think just in terms of the philosophy of Studiomake, when I say Studiomake, I think David and Im, they're inseparable in the way they work together. And of course, with the events of last year, things have shifted. Maybe you can talk about that professionally in terms of the work in the office and how you've transitioned.
I'm not sure how I've transitioned, to tell you the truth. I think, something like this is going to, I think it's going to take years in a way to kind of fully understand, what Studiomake without Im is like. I became a designer with her, so it's difficult to understand how I operate in a way without her. And I, that's a very practical thing, in that, in some ways, and that we both, provided a series of checks and balances. So to lose your partner within a professional context, ideally they're providing something that you cannot. So, on one level, I would like to say that if, the work of Studiomake will go on, it will remain unchanged, but it's kind of a catch-22, because if it does remain unchanged, then that would somehow mean that she was not contributing or something like that, which we all know that's definitely not the case. So in some ways, it's tempting to not try to do the same thing. Maybe Studiomake should restore classic cars instead of doing architecture. I don't know. We'll just have to see. But it's there's a lot of logistical issues wrapped up, of course, in a big tangle of emotional issues. And so, the studio is shifting in a lot of ways. With only one partner, we're able to do less projects in a way. And so, thinking about how the studio can at once contract and grow at the same time is kind of a difficult situation. So it's weird. I feel like in some ways, we are now like an established studio with new studio problems, and that we're kind of searching for an identity and trying to kind of reconsider our workflow. And so part of this is a shift towards more design build work. So by doing fewer projects, and potentially smaller projects, and in very practical terms, trying to make those fewer and smaller projects more profitable. That's one way of trying to reconcile the difference. I think the technical and the fabrication aspect of the studio was generally my comfort area in the beginning.
And maybe we segue into that. If maybe you can shift back the slides to
Sure.
maybe some photos of your workshop. Ban Sai Ma is incredible, not only as a home, but David's got the most amazing workshop in his house where he fabricates objects, but also, when Thai architects say, "Oh, I love to work with carpenters and Chang," they should really take a look at how you work, because maybe you can describe your whole complex and how you work with Chang or you live with Chang.
Yeah, well, quite literally. So, you know, our studio right now is 9 of us in the office, 9 architects, designers. And then we have 7, I'm looking at Josh, 7 guys outside right now. So we have 7 Chang who live and work at Bonsai Ma. And they're, you know, very much a part of our studio, and you know, deeply a part of our process. Of course, with the stuff that we fabricate, but also just kind of, you know, conceptually this fluid movement between the studio to the workshop, but between not only me but all of the staff on every level. Everybody's constantly in and out. You know, it's not only kind of a work process, like I draw this, I go out there, I give the drawing to him, he makes it, but it is collaborative in that we bring them in, you know, we talk about details. We go out, we make a sample, we bring the sample back. So it's really truly a back and forth process.
And your architecture tie is good, right?
It's better than my normal tie. My food and architecture is okay.
How was it to transition from a professional architect? You were a licensed architect in America, right?
Yeah.
You're used to a way of working, even working in your own workshop in America, and then transitioning to still loving to fabricate, but then having to work with Thai Chang. Maybe you can describe the first experiences and how you transition from that kind of.
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I think that the transition was easier for me than it was for him in a lot of ways, because I came here expecting to know nothing, expecting to be naive or expecting to be schooled. And, you know, Im came with kind of expectations, and that she grew up here, but left as a high schooler, or left as a high school graduate, and then returned as an architect. So her architectural education was identical to mine, but her cultural, you know, expectations were certainly more blended.
Just let me interrupt. So you went to undergrad with Im?
Yes. Yeah, we met in undergrad.
And then after that, you worked.
And then we worked in San Diego for different offices for a couple years. And then during that time, we both got our architecture licenses. And then, you know, we decided pretty early on in our relationship that we would practice together. It was just, I don't know, it just was natural. It just happened at the same time. And so, you know, it became kind of quickly obvious that it was a good idea to start our practice here. And so that decision to go to grad school was part of the decision to come here, was kind of a transition in a way.
Okay. I'm sorry I interrupted. You were going to finish your answer about...
I don't even remember what I was talking about.
That's all right then.
Yeah.
Okay, but that leads me to another good question, is that you have a professional degree, undergraduate degree in architecture, and then you worked as architects.
Yes.
But then came a very important decision to go to Cranbrook.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And can you tell us about that education? Because I want everybody to know how unique and non-architectural that education was.
Yeah. Well, just first of all...
What kind of school Cranbrook is, first of all?
Yeah, Cranbrook is a unique school. So, well, before we get into Cranbrook, I think, you know, it was important for us, and this is advice I give to all students, you know, thinking and considering their graduate degrees. And for me, my advice is always wait as long as you can, to make sure that you have a chance to kind of experience your architecture and kind of formulate maybe a more interesting point of view before you kind of engage your graduate studies. And so for us, that was very, we had a very specific way of working, or a specific way that we wanted to work when we went to graduate school. And so for that reason, we looked at a number of different schools, none of them architecture in the traditional sense. We were not really interested in continuing our academic pursuit of architecture in a way. And that,
why at that point?
I guess going back and studying architecture seemed like a step backwards. I think that we saw practice as a way of exploring architecture better than academically. So for us, we saw grad school as more of a, I always equate it to like, because when we ended up at art school, a lot of our peers thought we were kind of abandoning architecture, that it was like, screw architecture, I'm going to practice art. But we really saw it as a way to kind of practice, like maybe the way a footballer goes to the gym to lift weights, He's strengthening himself for the game. He's not trying to be better at picking up heavy things. And so for us, grad school was that opportunity, was a way of kind of buying ourselves time, quite literally. It's a huge investment. And I think it's worthy also, this is other advice I give, it's worthy to consider if there isn't better things you can do with that money. And so, to go back and also having already been licensed, it wasn't really, there wasn't really that much benefit on paper even to having a master's of architecture. So we were pretty set on a way of working. Now, because we were architects applying to art schools, and two people applying to ideally and getting into ideally the same school at the same time, we definitely cast our net fairly wide. So we applied to architecture schools, but we applied to architecture schools that we thought would allow us to work the way we wanted to work. In addition to applying to actual art schools. And so, Cranbrook was by far our first choice, and we both got in. And Cranbrook is a pretty unique institution, in that there is 10 departments. Each department is headed by a single artist in residence. Each department has 8 first-year students and 8 second-year students. So in some ways, it's a very small community. It's very focused. But at the same time, for those 16 students, the facilities are unbelievable. The ceramic studio has more kilns than some of the local tile factories in Detroit, literally. The kilns are like, you could fire a Volkswagen Beetle in one of the kilns, seriously. So, it was this really profound place with an intense focus on making. There's no classes, there's no grades. It's just open studios, 24 hours, with amazing facilities. And it was just like, you just go there and you just make. And it's self-guided, and you're there with very similar-minded people, and it becomes this really kind of amazing context in which to work.
And it probably made you see and practice architecture in a different way.
Yeah, I think it did. Another thing it made me realize is that made us realize is that we are not artists. Spending that much time with artists, you really start to understand the distinction between an artist and an architect. And not that there's never any overlap, but there is a very different way of talking about your work, and a very different way of viewing the world. And even though, what we might do stuff that some might say is artistic. It's definitely not art. I never would ever call myself as an artist, and not because I hate the word or can't identify with them, but because I don't approach work from that perspective.
And you, Im did ceramics, and you
did ceramics, and I was in the metal smithing department.
Okay, great. I think maybe it's time to open up the floor to some questions. I'd be happy to translate if you have any questions about the way the studio works, or any question at all.
I have a question. Why is it so cold in here?
Yeah.
I mean, can you guys see me shivering? It's not because I'm nervous. It's just like, and I'm gripping the mic with 2 hands like it's going to keep me warm.
It's warm.
It is slightly warm.
Yeah, yeah.
Damn architects.
Any questions?
It can be
It could be.
I love stupid questions, so if you have a stupid question, I'll definitely take those.
No?
No?
No? I have some more questions.
Yeah, well, we'll just keep talking until you guys tell us to stop.
Is there a time check? So I have 23 minutes left? Okay. Wow.
We don't have to take all 23 minutes.
We don't have to.
Oh, yes, that's great.
Okay, from your presentation, it's very inspiring in the way of the project of Pranbury, right? That you solve the problem of low budget and small scale by using fabrications process. I just wonder, it's kind of very give advantage in the way you can do in a kind of industrial scale level, like repetitive or somehow like not be spoken anymore in that way, in that regard. Do you interesting in kind of that?
That's not necessarily the aspect of prefabrication that I'm personally interested in. I think for Pranbury, for the Pranbury house, we saw this prefabrication as a methodology and a set of tools that would allow us to make something bespoke in a very efficient way. So it's not that I'm necessarily opposed to adding more of these or making 30 of them, but of course the project did not require that. So I think to kind of to project ahead a little bit, I think if we were to receive a project that was like, 30 pool villas, for example, I think my approach would not be to make a repetitive module, but to do something. It's going to take me a while to get back there.
Can you switch the screen to slides?
Hold on.
Can't screen that.
I think if we were going to do pool villas, it would be something like this, and that, we would come up with a system of, if each villa needed 4 parts, we would actually fabricate 12 parts and assemble each villa in a different way. So I'm much more interested in this idea of mass customization rather than mass production. So at first it sounds kind of boring to pump out a bunch of units, but I think if you can pump out a bunch of units that fit within these mass production or these industrial processes, and take advantage of that, and still end up with something unique and somewhat semi-bespoke, I think that's an interesting project. Why do you want to make some pool villas?
Yeah, I somehow like see the profit of it because you are in control of the shape and form and the process. Mm-hmm. Therefore, it's easier to transform into somehow industrial scale. And another example that actually today I'm looking forward to is Guan Yin Pavilion.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that I quite impressive in the way of you fabricate the piece
The
by
brick.
piece, right?
Yeah, we made the bricks for that project. I don't have slides of that. Sorry. You'll have to visit our website. But that's also similar to a similar way of working in that we, for the prefab project, for Guanyin Pavilion, extremely early in the conceptual design phase, we went and visited these factories. So the minute we have this idea of engaging some sort of industrial process, we want to go see the tools, and we want to go talk to the Chang, and we want to understand the process, and we want to figure out ways in which we can game the process. We don't want to kind of throw a wrench into the process, but we want to find ways in which we can kind of, use their tools, use their techniques in ways that maybe they hadn't thought of. And in a way kind of get something special out of something very normal. So the brick process was really about going to the brick factory, watching them make bricks, understanding the way the molds and the dies work, understanding the firing process, being inspired by materials that are there, and then taking all of that information and kind of allowing that to influence our creativity or act as a catalyst for our creativity.
Eddie? Yes. Melina?
Hi. Hi, David. I think we met a couple of years ago at one of these INDA events. I'm also an architect practicing here. I have a couple of questions. First, back to the prefab. You're mentioning that doing this prefab is saving money for the client. And when you just do one, it's kind of like a custom prefab because you're not like, you just answered this question. You're not pumping out like 20 of the same walls.
Correct.
So how are you saving money there? I'm curious. And that's a really small question. And I have a bigger question after this.
Do you want me to answer? Okay, so I'll answer that question first.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily saving the client money per se, but I think it's giving them a better piece of architecture for the same amount of money. And like I tried to kind of show with the diagram, we're not really taking the full benefits of prefabrication by having multiple units. But the reason we made the building perfectly square and made all four of those walls identical is so that we could then have some repetition within the single unit. So I think we do get some benefit from that. In the process of engaging the prefabrication factory as well, you show up and you say, I want to make one house. Most of the times those guys wouldn't return your call because they want to make 6,000. But this factory, the owner is sympathetic and saw this as very interesting. He also sees it as a way of him being able to transition into an entirely different market. Because right now, certainly in Thailand, prefabrication is how you make it's how you make a 7-Eleven, right? Or one of those CP food stores. That's the market for it in Thailand. And in fact, our factory, I think he exports 90% of his prefabricated units. So he became very interested because it represents a potentially new market for him. And I guess that's the other benefit of, that's the symbiotic relationship of going to factories and showing guys maybe new ways to use their tools or potentially new markets. So he saw this also, he said, he's like, well, I don't have to make 600 of it. I also have to make prototypes. So he's already kind of equipped or prepared to kind of engage in one-off units because he has to make prototypes in his normal process. So we're kind of not fully engaging in the kind of the full spectrum of prefabrication possibilities.
I thought you were making it yourself, actually. I didn't realize you went to a real prefab place. I mean, that's interesting to know that they actually took it.
Maybe we should make it. Josh, should we make it ourselves?
His employees are saying no.
Yeah.
No.
No, he just nodded yes, I think. Did you nod yes? Yeah.
But I think that's the interesting about how you've transitioned, because I would imagine before you wanted to fabricate everything yourself, but now that you've come to Thailand, I mean, there are people who will do things for you at a lower price where you don't have to do everything completely customized, correct?
Well, you can customize everything. And I think, the trick for us, did we answer your other question?
I haven't asked it yet.
Okay. The trick for us is finding, is understanding and designing towards outsourcing certain things, doing certain things in-house, and then also what are the things what are the things that P. David has to do? What are the things that I literally have to machine or cut myself? And there are some things, and that's not because I'm so ultra skilled, but also because I like it. I need it sometimes. That's the whole point of having a design build practice, is so you don't have to sit in front of your computer all day.
So this is a completely different question.
Oh, okay.
But my husband and I also used to work from home. We didn't really have such a beautiful Studiomake fabrication studio home. It was kind of a bit of a trailer storage space, more like.
That sounds nice.
But we did work from home for a long time. And I actually did a thesis for my architecture degree about living and working in the same space and all this kind of live, work, digital economy, blah, blah, everything is possible. But then I found that it was really challenging to work from home in the way, how do you divide? I mean, you're probably somebody who works all the time, but
right now, yeah.
How do you actually divide, sometimes you want to switch off, right? So it's really intriguing that you're doing this really full on to the nth degree, like fabrication, people living there with you. It's a bit of like a commune, maybe what Frank Lloyd Wright had at Taliesin East or West, or like, do you actually grow your own vegetables as well? I don't know. But it just seems like very full circle, and it's like the architect's kind of utopia. You grow your own vegetables, and you do a bit of sports, and then you make your things, and you have a party there. Yeah. But how does it actually work, and are there challenges to this?
Yeah, there's definitely challenges. There's, because of Im and I's relationship and how it evolved, there's never been a separation between the personal and the professional, and that our love blossomed in the architecture studio. And literally, she spent a lot of time helping. I was a couple years older than her, and she spent an inordinate amount of time helping me with my thesis, which was a fabrication process or project. And so, there is some separation, and that the building is big enough. It's 2 floors. The studio's downstairs. The house is upstairs. Our library is kind of the buffer between, so there is kind of a transition space, and that the library it's a studio facility, but it's really kind of my personal space as well. So, the pros far outweigh the cons, I guess. And, living and working in the same building was also by design, because, Im and I realized that it was a way in which we could not compromise in terms of the practice or the family. So we could have a kid and have her upstairs while we were downstairs. There's a way of really kind of having our cake and eating it too, or having the two kind of deeply entwined. I don't know. It was just kind of came naturally to us.
Well, as somebody who's been over to his house many times from an outsider's point of view, I think the design of the house is really important, because when I'm in your studio, I don't feel like it's a typical office. There's a home component when you walk into his office, because you've got shit in there that's home-like.
Right.
And even when you go into his workshop, it's the way it's connected to the library. You never feel like you're completely working. There's always a hybrid home and work element that I can't fully describe unless you go there, because that's the wonderful thing. You never felt like, okay, this is his office, and then that's his home. And there's a definite line between, and that's the beauty of me talking about David and Im, and that the way they work and the way they live are inseparable in the most beautiful way for me, and it reflects in your house as well.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's also a question for my employees as well, like, because I think in some ways, you know, the question is, am I living in my office, or are they working in my home? And I think it's kind of gray, in a good way, I think, both ways. Yeah, if there's any more questions, that's great. Otherwise, no pressure.
Otherwise, we can end 9 minutes early. Oh, one question.
Hi. My question is, in the larger scale project, like maybe your project in Rangsit University, how do your process work? I mean, how do you separate the way you work, like which one is the part of the conventional contractor, or which part is done by you, or could you explain more about this?
Yeah, that's a good question. Every project is different, and it really depends, of course, on budget, client, scale. So for the Rangsit projects, the kind of the big institutional projects, they are not design build by any means. Our kind of working method is mainly focused to a more traditional architectural approach, although maybe we take our prototyping and kind of, we take our prototyping, I guess, a little more seriously. In that kind of project where we have no control over contractor selection, or really kind of no control over the contractor at all, we try to make sure that any difficult or complex or unique ideas we have been kind of fully researched, prototype, kind of vetted, so that when we go into it, it's in theory going to be easier for the contractor to execute, but it's also gives us leverage in that we know that it can be done. And we have proof, and we have the research, and we say, oh no, you can get this brick. We've already paid for the prototype. Here's the contact. You need to order it by this date. And so we can, in fact, we write those things into the drawings, into the specifications. And so by doing that research ahead of time, we can ensure that kind of more unique things can happen on a project that would not normally facilitate unique things. So that's at the biggest scale. At the smallest scale, we just make it ourselves. And then, we're in this kind of middle scale too, that we're still, researching or kind of figuring out where we do start to divide the work between a regular contractor and ourselves. So we start to do things that maybe are too weird or too much of a pain in the ass for some contractors. And we say, okay, well, look, this scope of work Studiomake will do, and this scope of work the normal contractor will do. And so we'll kind of design that interface into it so that it can be a clean separation, and so that those two things can come together gracefully. We had another project down in Hua Hin that we didn't follow through on, but on that one we took a very extreme approach, in that for the building we had to use this local contractor who was especially unskilled. And so we made a clear distinction between the kind of the dumb parts of the building and the smart parts of the building, and we really tried to design a way in which the base of the building was very tamada, and that we would kind of build and truck in the special parts and that those two would kind of, there would be a nice conversation, not that they're Band-Aids. So, ideally, it's scalable. Yeah.
Any more questions? One more.
Hi, I just curious whether you have considered doing the prefab for your house before, and if you do, what's the reason you choose not to do prefab for your house?
We did not consider prefab at that time. It was not within our knowledge base. Our house was our very first project. And so, very first project here in Thailand, and so we tried to really stick to, in a way, very simple things. So the house has kind of a richness to it, maybe even overwrought, but in a way it's very simple. It's still very, it's steel, gypsum. It has a blue scope, metal roof. Thank you, Blue Scope. Actually, why should I thank them? Well, thank them today, but I didn't get any discount at the time. Anyway. Okay. But we like
video.
But we like to use our Blue Scope very nice and straight. Studiomake doesn't like curves. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. So, we were using very kind of tamada materials, and that was to us the magic of working in Bangkok, and that was the paradigm shift that we had in that first year, was that we showed up with this kind of set of architectural resources in our head and found none of that here. Instead, we found only the most basic of materials. But it's this, and this is actually what we normally lecture about. When we lecture to a Western audience, we talk about this relationship between the cost of labor and the cost of material. And in the West, it's the inverse. The cost of labor dominates everything you do. All decisions you make, materials you specify, little devices that are invented to kind of shave minutes off of installing something. And none of that exists here because the cost of living is so low. The cost of labor is low. But of course now any sort of semi-exotic material gets really expensive really quick. One of the early designs for our house, we have this long translucent wall that faces the street. And, in our first little conceptual models, we were like, we're going to use cow wall for this. I don't know if you're familiar with cow wall. But it's this translucent, insulated wall panel system that is produced in America. And, so we get online and, there's no cow wall distributor here. No problem, maybe they'll ship it to us. So we send them drawings, we go through this whole process, and we get this quotation from them for the cost of, this kind of translucent wall system on just one part of the house. It's maybe 50% of the facade. And it was over half of our entire budget for the entire house. It was millions of baht. And it was just like, there's, we would have this and nothing else. And so it was just kind of like, this makes no sense to kind of import these exotic materials. And so we did this kind of DIY cow wall system and came up with our own methodology. And so it's, for us to be able to kind of take advantage of doing things in some ways more custom was very attractive at the time. So, like the steel house or the steel structure is a fully welded moment frame structure, because it was important for us to have no cross bracing, no lateral bracing, so that walls could be moved around. And so that meant having the steel frame fully welded on site, which is somewhat normal for Thailand, but that's unheard of in the West. You would never have welders on site welding nonstop for 3 months, And so all these kind of elaborate bracket details that we worked out with our structural engineer, it became very kind of we were just kind of taking advantage of this really kind of interesting context where we could do these really labor-intensive things with simple materials.
Great. 10 seconds left. Any more questions? If not, then we made good time.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, David.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks.
Right now, I would like to ask Mr. Chatpong to give a token of appreciation for Mr. David, please.
Thank you very much. May I switch my language into Thai for further PR news ขออนุญาตประชาสัมพันธ์ข่าวของอาสาเพิ่มเติมนะคะสมาคมสถาปนิกสยามในพระบรมราชูปถัมภ์ขอเรียนเชิญสมาชิกและผู้สนใจร่วมกันนำเสนอบ้านที่ถูกออกแบบให้สอดคล้องกับพัฒนาการและความเปลี่ยนแปลงในช่วงรัชสมัยแห่งการครองราชย์ของในหลวงรัชกาลที่ 9 ระหว่างปีพ.ศ. 2489 ถึง พ.ศ. 2559 ค่ะเพื่อดำเนินการรวบรวมและตีพิมพ์ลงในหนังสือบ้านในรัชสมัยของในหลวงรัชกาลที่ 9 โดยสมาชิกและท่านผู้สนใจสามารถดูข้อมูลเพิ่มเติมได้ที่เว็บไซต์อาสาและอีเมลที่ได้ขึ้นไว้บนเวทีณขณะนี้นะคะโดยจะมีขั้นตอนการส่งข้อมูลคือถ่ายรูปบ้านในสมัยรัชกาลที่ 9 จากนั้นสแกน QR code และอัปโหลดรูปบ้านขึ้นบนเว็บไซต์ค่ะ
ค่ะและอีกหนึ่งโครงการที่จะขอประชาสัมพันธ์คือโครงการ Halodex Architects สำหรับสถาปนิกนิสิตและนักศึกษานะคะซึ่งเป็นส่วนหนึ่งของโครงการอาสาไดอะล็อกที่จัดตั้งขึ้นโดยคณะกรรมการสมาคมสถาปนิกสยามโดยมีวัตถุประสงค์เพื่อเสริมสร้างกิจกรรมทางวิชาการรูปแบบต่างๆประกอบไปด้วยการจัดนิทรรศการการอบรมเชิงปฏิบัติการระยะสั้นและการเสวนาเชิงวิชาชีพและวิชาการโดยทางสถาปนิก Halodex ผู้ออกแบบสถานทูตออสเตรียในวันที่และในวันที่ 14 มิถุนายนจะมีเวิร์กช็อปจัดโดยจะมีเลคเชอร์นะคะจัดโดยสถาปนิก Halodex ที่สถานทูตออสเตรียเช่นกันค่ะและมีเวิร์กช็อปโดย Halodex อีกครั้งตั้งแต่วันที่ 17 มิถุนายนถึง 30 กรกฎาคมนะคะสามารถสมัครส่งพอร์ตโฟลิโอได้ที่ vienna@halodexarchitects.com ที่อยู่บนจอนะคะและก็สามารถดูรายละเอียดเพิ่มเติมได้ที่อาสาเว็บไซต์ค่ะ
วันนี้นะคะสมาชิกของอาสาสามารถจะขอรับสูจิบัตรบ้านได้นะคะแล้วก็หนังสือ Le Corbusier and Louis Icahn นักกายกรรมและโยคีแห่งสถาปัตยกรรมได้ที่อาสาคลับนะคะฟรีนะคะแล้วก็ในเวลานี้จะขอขอบคุณเฟอร์นิเจอร์สวยๆนะคะบนเวทีจาก Curio ค่ะ
Thank you. There will be a lunch break. Our next session by Kaisuke Meida from UID.Universal Innovative Design Architects will begin at 1:30. See you after the break.
Thank you.
Thanks.